Everybody, stop what you're doing and pay very close attention, because something is building in the Gulf of Mexico right now that I have been watching very carefully, and I need you to understand exactly what is happening. We are only days into the 2026 Atlantic hurricane season, and already the Gulf is sending us signals that we absolutely cannot ignore. The water temperatures, the atmospheric setup, the long-range models, well, all of it is pointing to one thing. The Gulf of Mexico is primed. And the problem is growing faster than most people realize. So today, we are going deep. We are going to break down everything you need to know. The ocean temperatures, the atmospheric patterns, the model data, and most importantly, what this means for you and the communities along the Gulf Coast. Stay with me all the way through, because this one is important. Let's start with where things stand right now as we enter the very first week of June 2026. The 2026 Atlantic hurricane season officially kicked off on June 1st. And here's what the forecasters are saying. NOAA is projecting a below normal season overall. They're putting a 55% chance on below normal activity, largely driven by an El Nino that is expected to develop over the coming months. Colorado State University, one of the most respected seasonal forecast teams in the world, is calling for roughly 13 named storms and 6 hurricanes. AccuWeather is slightly more aggressive, calling for 11 to 16 named storms. Now, here's what I need you to understand. Below normal does not mean no threat. Let me repeat that. A suppressed season on paper does not mean you are safe. It only takes one storm, just one, making landfall in the wrong place to make this the most devastating year of your life. That is not fear-mongering. That is meteorological reality. And right now, the Gulf of Mexico is holding something that demands your full attention. Let's talk about what is happening beneath the surface, because this is where the real story begins. The Gulf of Mexico has been running warmer than normal. In fact, according to NOAA data, sea surface temperatures across the Gulf are currently sitting among the 3rd warmest on record for this time of year. Right now in late May and early June, we are talking water temperatures already climbing into the low to mid 80s Fahrenheit across large portions of the basin. Now, why does that matter so much? Here's the science, and I want you to really lock this in. The hurricanes are essentially massive heat engines. They pull thermal energy out of the ocean and convert it into the kinetic energy of wind, rain, and storm surge. The warmer the water, the more fuel available. Scientists have long established that water temperatures need to be at or above 80 degrees, roughly 26, 7 Cs, for tropical development to sustain itself. But here's what's alarming. We're not just barely crossing that threshold. In multiple parts of the Gulf right now, we are well above it. Research published recently by Yale Climate Connections has highlighted something truly startling. Since around 2012, the Gulf of Mexico's summer sea surface temperatures have been warming at roughly double the pace of global ocean warming overall. Let that sink in. Double the rate. And the trend has continued. Record highs were set in both 2024 and 2025, and near-record warmth has carried into 2026. And there's another layer to this. Ocean heat content. It's not just what the surface looks like, it's how deep that warm water goes. When warm water extends 100 meters or more below the surface, a hurricane passing over it cannot churn up the colder water from the depths to slow itself down. Instead, the storm mixes up more warm water and keeps intensifying. This is exactly the phenomenon that fueled Hurricane Helene's furious intensification as it barreled toward the Florida coastline in 2024. And there's the loop current to talk about. This is a powerful river of warm Caribbean water that flows northward through the Yucatan Channel into the Gulf of Mexico, bends east toward the Florida Keys, and then merges with the Gulf Stream. When the loop current pushes deep into the northern Gulf, or when it sheds a warm eddy, it creates isolated pools of superheated water that can act as rocket fuel for any storm unlucky enough to track over them. The bottom line? The Gulf of Mexico right now is not in a neutral state. It is primed, and any tropical system that gets organized and moves into that water has a serious intensification threat. Now let's talk about the atmospheric side of the equation, because water temperature alone doesn't tell the whole story. For tropical development to happen, you need several ingredients to come together. You need warm ocean water. We've established that's there. You need low wind shear, meaning winds in the upper atmosphere aren't dramatically changing direction and speed, which would rip a developing storm apart. You need sufficient moisture, and you need some kind of triggering mechanism, a disturbance, a wave, a low pressure zone, to kick things off. Right now, as we open June 2026, AccuWeather's lead hurricane expert has noted that wind shear is currently the greatest deterrent for tropical development across the Gulf, the Caribbean, and the southwestern Atlantic. That's actually somewhat good news for the short term. Disorganized shear is buying us a little time. But, and this is a big but, the long-range models are suggesting that this shear pattern will not hold. What we are seeing in the extended models is a transition in the large-scale weather pattern that could open a window for tropical development as we move through the second and third week of June. Here's what to watch. The models, both the American GFS ensemble system and the European ECMWF, are beginning to show increased tropical moisture surging northward out of Central America and the Western Caribbean. When a cold front sweeps through the southeast and clears out, it often leaves behind a favorable environment behind it, a high-pressure ridge that can steer developing systems northward into the Gulf. That's the scenario multiple model suites are hinting at. The Boston Globe's meteorology team recently highlighted that Gulf sea surface temperatures are the third warmest on record for May heading into this season, and long-range models are already suggesting clusters of showers and thunderstorms could fire up in the Gulf. Now, I want to be careful here and say this clearly. Models at this range are not reliable for specific storm forecasting. But what they are reliable for is identifying favorable environments. And the environment they're showing us deserves our attention. I want to spend a moment on something that I think gets underestimated every single year: the danger of early season Gulf storms. Most people hear hurricane season and think August, September. That's when the big ones happen, right? And statistically, yes, the peak of hurricane season runs from mid-August through mid-October. But here's the reality about June Gulf storms. They form close to land and they form fast. The weather. COM's science team put it perfectly. When storms develop in June, they tend to form in the Gulf, the northwestern Caribbean, and the Atlantic near the mid-Atlantic coast. These are areas close to populated coastlines. That means there's less time to track a storm, less time to issue watches and warnings, and less time for communities to prepare and evacuate. Let's look at what recent June storms have done. In June 2025, Tropical Storm Barry developed in the Bay of Campeche and made landfall in eastern Mexico, bringing significant flooding across the Yucatan Peninsula and producing heavy rainfall impacts all the way into South Texas. In June 2024, Tropical Storm Alberto made landfall in eastern Mexico, but still generated 2 to 4 feet of storm surge on the Texas coast and dropped 5 to 8 inches of rainfall across South Texas. In June 2021, Tropical Storm Claudette brought significant flooding and spawned tornadoes all the way from the Gulf Coast into the southeast United States, resulting in flood-related deaths in Alabama. In June 2020, Tropical Storm Cristobal hit the northern Gulf Coast, producing significant storm surge, heavy rainfall, gusty winds, and tornadoes. Are you seeing the pattern here? June Gulf storms don't have to be major hurricanes to cause serious, sometimes deadly damage. The flooding, the surge, the spin-up tornadoes, all of it is on the table. And with water temperatures as warm as they are this year, any system that does get organized has enhanced potential. Now I want to talk about something that keeps meteorologists up at night, and it should be on your radar too: rapid intensification. Rapid intensification is defined as a tropical system increasing its sustained winds by at least 35 miles per hour in just 24 hours. It's the nightmare scenario, a storm that looks manageable on Monday becoming a monster by Tuesday. And the conditions that enable rapid intensification? Warm water, especially when that warmth extends deep below the surface, low wind shear, and plenty of atmospheric moisture. Sound familiar? Yes. Those are the conditions the Gulf is increasingly capable of delivering. Here is a number that should stop you cold. Studies have established that for every Föhn-Dersie increase in sea surface temperature, the maximum potential intensity of a hurricane increases by about 5 to 7%. The Gulf has warmed by approximately 0, 8 degrees over just the past decade alone. Run those numbers out, and we are talking about meaningfully stronger storms than what the historical record tells us to expect. Even more sobering, research has shown that as water temperatures climb from 80 degree to 85 degree, hurricane rainfall increases by a factor of 5 times. And once sea surface temperatures push past 83 or 84 degrees, fully formed hurricanes, when wind shear is cooperating, frequently undergo rapid intensification. The loop current and the warm water eddies it spins off are especially dangerous in this context. When a hurricane tracks over one of those deep, superheated eddies, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. We saw this with Helene in 2024. We have seen it time and time again in recent years, and the Gulf's thermal structure right now suggests the potential for this scenario is not going away. It is growing. I want to be clear and balanced with you because I think some weather content leans too far toward panic, and that doesn't serve you well. So let me give you the full picture. NOAA's official 2026 season outlook does call for below normal overall activity, a 55% probability. The primary driver of this suppression is the developing El Niño. When El Niño is in place, it typically increases upper-level wind shear across the Atlantic and Caribbean, which makes it harder for storms to form and intensify in those regions. Colorado State University forecasters describe the current setup as one where activity is typically less widespread than normal. with development favored in fewer areas across the basin. So yes, the overall numbers may end up being lower this year, fewer named storms, fewer hurricanes in the record books by December 1st. But here's what every seasonal forecaster emphasizes, and I want you to hear this. Seasonal forecasts describe the broader environment, not the outcome of any single storm. Even in a suppressed year, it only takes one system taking advantage of favorable conditions to produce significant impacts. That quote is from a WeatherWorks meteorologist, and it echoes what meteorologists everywhere will tell you. The average person living in Galveston or Tampa or New Orleans doesn't care about the seasonal storm count. They care about whether their storm makes landfall. And one storm is all it takes. And right now, as I'm looking at the June setup, the warm Gulf, the transitioning pattern, the moisture surging northward from Central America, I am not dismissing this, not by a long shot. Let me break down geographically what areas need to have their heads on a swivel right now. The northern Gulf Coast, and this means Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle, faces the most direct threat if any system organizes in the central or northern Gulf. The warm water is there. The coastline is low-lying and vulnerable to surge. These communities have seen what Gulf storms can do, from Katrina to Ida to Helene, and they cannot afford to be complacent. South Florida and the Florida Peninsula. Florida sits at the intersection of the Gulf and the Atlantic, and systems approaching from the Western Caribbean or the Yucatan often have Florida in their long-range sights. The flat, low topography of South Florida makes it especially vulnerable to flooding from heavy rainfall, even from relatively weak systems. South Texas and the Texas Gulf Coast, as the track of several recent June systems has demonstrated, even storms that make landfall in Mexico can produce significant surge and rainfall impacts along the Texas coast. If a system organizes in the Bay of Campeche or the Western Gulf, South Texas moves to the front of the watch list immediately. Central America and the Yucatan Peninsula, this is where many June systems first get organized. The Western Caribbean and the Bay of Campeche have been active breeding grounds for early season storms in recent years, and with favorable atmospheric energy expected to push northward through this region in the coming weeks, this is ground zero for where we watch first. I want to zoom out for a moment and talk about the bigger picture, because this Gulf problem we're discussing today is not just a 2026 problem. What scientists are documenting is a long-term shift in the Gulf of Mexico, one that has profound implications for everyone who lives along its shores or in its hurricane paths. Since 2012, the rate of summer sea surface temperature warming in the Gulf has accelerated to roughly 10 times the long-term historical trend. 10 times. Research cited by Yale Climate Connections shows the warming rate from 2012 to 2025 is 16 times the rate seen in the full historical record dating back to 1850. Longer-term climate projections from IPCC models suggest that under a moderate global warming scenario, Gulf temperatures during peak hurricane season could rise another 5 to 1, 5 degrees Celsius by the middle of this century. Under more extreme warming scenarios, that number jumps to 1.5 to 3 degrees Celsius. Apply those 5 to 7% intensity increases per degree of warming, and you are looking at potential winds of major hurricanes increasing by 10 to 20% or more above historical norms. Some studies have projected that rising sea surface temperatures could double the number of Category 4 and Category 5 hurricanes globally by the end of this century, particularly in the Western Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico. I'm not here to debate the politics of climate. That is not what this channel is about. What this channel is about is giving you accurate, actionable weather information so that you can protect your family and make smart decisions. And the data on Gulf warming is not political. It is observational. It is what the instruments are measuring. And it demands that we take the Gulf threat more seriously every single year going forward. So what do I want you to actually do with all this information? Let me give you concrete action steps, because information without action doesn't protect anybody. Number 1, make your hurricane plan now, not when a storm is 48 hours out. The time to figure out where you're going to go, what you're going to take, and how you're going to communicate with your family is right now, on a calm Tuesday in June, not when a Category 3 is spinning in the Gulf and the gas stations are running dry. Sit down this week, make the plan. Number 2, know your evacuation zones. Every Gulf Coast and Atlantic Coast county has designated evacuation zones, Zone A, Zone B, and so on, based on surge risk. Look yours up right now. You should be able to find them on your county emergency management website. Knowing that information in advance could literally be the difference between life and death. Number 3, build or refresh your supply kit. You need at minimum a 72-hour supply kit, ideally enough for 7 to 14 days. Water, 1 gallon per person per day. Non-perishable food, medications, critically important. Flashlights and extra batteries. A battery-powered or hand-crank weather radio. Important documents in a waterproof container. Cash, because ATMs go down in power outages. Number 4, keep one eye on the Gulf throughout June and July. Even in a below normal season, June is historically when Gulf systems can form with very little warning time. Follow the National Hurricane Center's tropical weather outlooks. They post those twice daily during non-active periods and more frequently when development is possible. Subscribe to local National Weather Service alerts. And obviously, keep following this channel because we'll be all over any development that threatens the coast. Number 5, don't let a quiet start to the season lull you to sleep. Some of the most dangerous moments in weather forecasting come when people are surprised. A quiet first 2 weeks of June can make people feel like the season is a non-event. It is not. The warm water doesn't go away. The atmospheric pattern keeps evolving. And when the right storm, in the right place, the right time, over the right water, all the pieces click into place faster than you might expect. Let me bring this all together for you, everybody. Here is where we stand right now at the very opening of the 2026 Atlantic hurricane season. The Gulf of Mexico is running near record warm, third warmest for this time of year on record. Sea surface temperatures are sitting well above the threshold needed for tropical development. The loop current and the warm water eddies it produces represent a serious rapid intensification threat for any system that gets organized over the basin. The atmospheric pattern, while currently featuring some wind shear that is keeping development at bay in the short term, is expected to transition in the coming weeks, opening a window for tropical activity. Seasonal forecasts call for a below normal season overall, driven by developing El Niño conditions. But every forecasting organization is emphasizing the same thing. All it takes is one storm. Recent June storms have proven time and time again that early season Gulf systems can produce deadly flooding, dangerous storm surge, and tornado spin-ups across the Gulf Coast and southeast, even without being major hurricanes. The long-term trajectory of the Gulf is one of accelerating warming, and that has serious implications for how powerful the storms that do form can become. This Gulf problem is real, it is growing, and it is something that every single person living along or near the Gulf Coast needs to have on their radar from right now through the end of November. Share this video with your family and friends along the coast. Hit that subscribe button if you are not already subscribed, because as this season develops, we are going to be tracking every disturbance, every model run, and every shift in the pattern so that you have the information you need when you need it. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're located and what your biggest concern is heading into this season. I read every single one of those. Stay weather aware, stay prepared, and above all, stay safe, everybody. We will see you in the next update. God bless.